Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people think they are the center of the universe, like this person right here who posts this in front of their house. Do not buy that house before talking to me. And hey, you can already tell they're gonna be lovely people, if they let you live next door to them, of course. My friends, strap yourselves in because the stories in this one are wild and will leave you shaking your heads. With that said, guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today and do hit that subscribe button for future tales. Okay, so this happened last night, and my family completely lost their minds at me about it. So here I am. I take the bus to and from work, as my car got totaled a month ago, and I'm still waiting on insurance to reimburse me so I can get a new one. So at my job, I'm literally on my feet all day, and I work 10-hour shifts. It sucks, but the pay's good, so I can deal. But after a long day, my feet are sore. I genuinely cherish the time I spend sitting on the bus ride home, knowing I have to walk another 15 to 20 minutes to my house from the bus stop, which means more time on my feet. So last night I'm on the bus and a very heavily pregnant lady gets on. The woman looks around for a seat, only to find that there's none available. I'm the closest to her, so she starts giving me the imploring eyes. Now I had my headphones on and I tried to pretend that I couldn't see her, but once she started talking to me, it became inevitable. Now, I wasn't rude or anything, I just told her no, I've had a long day and my feet are sore and I don't want to give up my seat. The woman told me that I'm being rude and she starts crying about how she's a pregnant single mom, and I told her I'm sorry, but that's her personal choice and that she can't expect other people to accommodate her life choices. Now, we live in a state where birth control and abortions are free, so I don't know why this should be my problem. It's not my fault she decided to have a baby when she can't afford a car. After going back and forth a bit, an old man finally shouted that I'm a worthless punk, and then he offered his seat to the lady. He starts ranting and raving, and I just look the other way pretending I didn't hear it. As they were trading seats, I guess the bus driver had to slam the brakes for whatever reason, and the pregnant lady and the old man both fell. They start yelling at me, calling me all sorts of nasty names, but I just looked the other way and ignored it. When I got home, I told my sister about the entitled woman who wanted my seat on the bus, thinking she would take my side and understand, but she flipped out and she went crying to my parents, who also chewed me out. I don't know why we need to keep perpetuating the idea that breeding somehow means you're entitled to people's seats. Am I the a-hole though? Okay, so a lot of people in the post say that OP is in fact the a-hole. Now listen guys, do you have to give up your seat for pregnant and old people on the bus? No, there's no rule that says you have to. But do people do it out of the kindness of their hearts? Yes, a lot of people do. It doesn't make OP an a-hole for not wanting to give up his seat. What makes him the a-hole is the fact that he said out loud to her that she chose to get pregnant, she chose to take the bus, and she can't expect people to accommodate her. That's what makes him the entitled a-hole. And I get it, okay? Kids aren't for everybody. But that doesn't give you a valid reason to be a jerk to people who do choose to get pregnant and choose to have kids. Like, have some empathy. Okay, so this next story isn't really entitled, but it was shared with me, and I was left blown away at this that I had to share it with you guys. My wife has a horrible habit that I discovered 2 months ago. We were ordering lunch on the Subway app, and I told her to pick the location that has a drive-thru, and that way we don't have to go inside and take the baby out of the car just to clip him back a few minutes later. She told me it's not a big deal to leave the baby in the car, to run in and just pick it up really fast. Now, I had no idea she ever did this. I told her I wasn't comfortable with her leaving him in the car alone, even for a minute, and she told me she's been doing it since he was born and it's always been fine. She told me she does it to pick up food, run into the post office, or pharmacy, stores, etc., and I was floored. Now, we don't live in a horrible area, but it's also not super safe either. I told her to not ever do this again. She told me she never stopped to think about the potential dangers and that she would stop doing it. Well, yesterday, as I was driving home from my brother's house, I spot her car at the gas station near our place. It was parked in a spot up front and not a pump, so I figured she stopped in to grab some snacks, which we like to do. I decided to stop and go in and say hi and get some food, so I pulled in and parked right next to her. However, when I got there, I was furious to find that our son was still in his car seat. And the worst part of all, the car wasn't even locked. I don't know what came over me, but in that moment, I decided to take my son and put him into my car, as he's got a car seat in there too. I then drove to the other side of the gas station parking lot and waited for my wife to come out. It took her 6 minutes to appear. When she saw that he was gone, she looked stunned for a second, and then she started to frantically look around and cry. I didn't let it go on for long. After this, I saw her pulling her phone out, presumably to call 911, and that's when I pulled my car around to her. I parked, got out, walked around to my son's door, and opened it to show him to her. She looked extremely relieved, but that quickly turned to anger with her asking me why in the world would I do that to her. At this, I told her that she needed to learn her lesson, and that she promised to stop leaving him in the car, and that was extremely irresponsible. It was so easy for me to pull up and take him, and imagine someone else. And no one at the gas station even noticed. So if he was really taken, there would have been no help, and it would have 100% been her fault. She then proceeded to call me cruel and psychotic, and tried taking our son out of my car into hers. I told her no, that I'd be driving him home, and I left. She came home not much later, but she ignored me for the rest of the day. She's now really angry at me, and finally acknowledged me today saying she wanted an apology. I said absolutely not, as she's the one who should be saying sorry. She's been guilt-tripping me the rest of the day, saying that no mother should experience the fear I put her through. So did I go too far? Okay, in my opinion, I think that yes, OP did go a little bit too far with that. But with that said, better him yesterday than an actual predator tomorrow, right? Like, there have been so many stories where people just hop into unlocked cars and drive away with newborns in the back. And his wife was super neglectful, and she was putting her child in dangerous situations many, many times. And I really hope she learned her lesson. But, guys, let me know if you agree with what OP did, or if he went way too far. So this was back in the days where you'd play with whichever other children you could find in your neighborhood until the streetlights came on, and then you'd run home before your mom started yelling for you to come in for dinner. So I lived in one of the fairly nice homes in a newly built street, where all of the homes were more or less the same. They all had a pool, including ours. A few streets away, the houses were much less new, but I would frequent the park in the center of them. I made friends with another girl who lived next to the park. Her house did not have a pool, so on hot days, she would knock politely on our door and bring a snack for us to share, and we would play in my pool for hours. Now, there was another girl, the entitled girl, a little bit younger than us, who would occasionally join us playing in the park. She lived another few streets away from the park. My friend was familiar with her and her large family of brothers and sisters, who were both much older and younger than her. My friend was very kind, and she would let the entitled kid play with us, but she would never let her follow us back to her house, and discouraged me from doing the same. My friend told me that she and the kid had been really good friends the previous year, but the entitled kid had stolen her favorite Barbie, and she had never given it back. A few weeks later, the entitled kid and I became good friends, despite my friend's warning. On a very hot summer's day, I invited both my friend and the entitled kid over to enjoy the pool. Friend number 1 showed up with her usual snacks and toys for us to share, but when the entitled kid showed up, she appeared at our side gate with not 1, but 5 members of her family. 2 of her younger siblings, maybe around 5 years old, and 2 older siblings, a teenager and another a few years older than us. All of whom ignored me and barged straight past me to dive into the pool and start playing around and making a mess. I was a little stunned, and went inside to let my mother know that we would need more sausages on the barbecue for lunch, for my friends. Of course, she wanted to know why. I can only tell her that the entitled kid had brought some friends. My mom was stunned, and she asked me if I invited them. And when I said no, she stormed straight outside and told them that only the entitled kid was invited. That she was fine to stay, but that they were rude to invite themselves, and there's no way it was safe for 2 5-year-olds to be unsupervised. I remember the teenager had a few words to say, but my stepfather stepped in and told them to go home. The entitled kid was dragged out by the teenager, and she left scowling daggers at me. A few days later, my friend told me all of the nasty things that entitled kid had been saying about me to her and the other children who lived in the area. Now, I was so upset that I told my mother, who immediately took me over to the entitled kid's house to talk it out. The mom answered the door. I remember she invited us inside, and I remember both mothers insisting that we kids apologize to each other for any mean words that we said, and it was all just a misunderstanding, etc., etc., all better now. But less than a week later, my mother, stepfather, and I returned from being out for the day, and we heard whooping and yelling and loud music in our backyard. We walked in to find the back gate wide open, and the kid and her entire family, and I mean her entire family, at least 20 people, were all fully clothed, messing around in our pool. There was food, rubbish, and bottles absolutely everywhere. I remember my stepfather going red and immediately start yelling at them to get the heck off our property. I missed most of the argument, as my mom sent me away so I couldn't hear the language that was being used, but I remember the entitled mom screaming abuse and calling us names. The G-rated version would be rude, white trash, snobs. Later on, my mom explained to me that according to the other mom, somewhere in their conversation about the misunderstanding, my mother had somehow given the impression that since the entitled kid was welcome in our home, therefore it must be open to the entire family. So they had decided to celebrate an aunt's birthday party in our backyard, without asking us. They told us we were terrible people for ruining the aunt's birthday party. My father had to threaten to call police before they would leave. The entitled kid never spoke to me again. Even if OP's mom offered them use of the backyard, the polite thing to do would have been to ask ahead of time to use it. Not invite 20 people into the backyard and throw a birthday party without even consulting the homeowner. Some people are truly too entitled. So I have a friend who's asked me for money several times. To put context into it, I'm a teacher. I live with my boyfriend and I have no kids. She's married and she has 2 kids. Late 2019, she calls me and she tells me she's in financial trouble, and she asked if I could lend her $1,300 and that she would pay me in 3 months' time. It was the start of the school year, and she couldn't pay for her kids' things, and she couldn't even afford food by this point. Kids are my weak point, so I end up lending her the money, which was all of my savings. 3 months later, she called to tell me that she quit her job because she wanted to start her own business to spend more time with her kids. Now, due to that, it would take her longer to pay me back since she was taking the money to start her own business. Once again, she begged me to give her more time because she needed to feed her kids. At this, I was angry, but we've been friends for a long time, so I told her to pay me half now, and the other half she can take her time to pay me back with. And she took her sweet time paying me back. In the meantime, she would get her nails done, go out to fancy dinners, go on vacations, and everything. She ended up paying me a year later. In 2020, her small business took off and she was doing pretty well. She called me to ask if I could help her tutor her oldest kid with her online schooling, since she was falling behind, and she said she would pay me. Again, kids are involved, so I gave in. Silly me. I spent over 30 hours of tutoring with her that month and got her all caught up with school. And guess what? She didn't pay me. She would go on and on and on about how she would do it next month, and she never did. After this, the boyfriend and I distanced ourselves from them, and I got tired of asking her for the money back, so I just took it as a life lesson. So last night, she texted me after a long time with the same speech. She's having trouble with her business, she's got no money, her husband has his own debts, and she needs me to lend her money, saying, oh, only $1,000 will do. Now, I've learned my lesson, so I said I don't have any money to spare right now. She continued with her sob story, but I didn't cave. That same night, she calls me at 2 a.m., waking me up in the middle of the night, going on and on and on about how she couldn't sleep since she really needs the money. She said she could even get evicted, that if I love her kids, I should help her. So you can imagine, I snapped. It was late, but I told her something like, if you live beyond your means, it's not my problem. I'm not responsible for the well-being of your kids, no matter how much I like them. I told her she should stop asking for money and get her awful life together on her own. I also uninvited her family to my boyfriend's birthday next week, telling her that I'm cutting this friendship off for good. I woke up to a text from her husband saying that she trusts me the most, and that's why she asked me for money. Her other friends are saying that I should have just said no and not have humiliated her like that. Another one of her friends even said that since I don't have kids, that I should look out for those who do have kids. So yeah, OP's friend wasn't a true friend at all. She saw how loving and caring OP was, and she pretty much used that to her advantage. She was clearly making irresponsible decisions and blowing cash left and right, and expected OP to help. So OP does come back with an update post, and here it is. This is kind of an update to an old post. I had this friend, let's call her P, who always asked for money. And I did the stupidest thing and I lent her some, and she also never paid me back for the services I did for her. So last year I had enough. I told her no, and our friendship died there. I had no contact with her, but my boyfriend occasionally plays video games online with her husband and a group of friends. One of those friends, let's call him Alan, is living abroad, and he's visiting for 10 days. Conversations were being held about getting together. Alan is a dear friend of mine, so I would sacrifice dealing with P for one night just to see him, since he only has 10 days to visit every friend and family member. They wanted to meet today, but Alan needed to quarantine until his PCR test comes clean. My country's rules. So since he hasn't got it yet, there's no meeting tonight. I'm also a teacher that's currently working weekdays, so I said I'd rather do it on a weekend, and that was being discussed too. So P and her husband text us to check when my boyfriend and I are going to be coming tonight. They just assumed it would be at their place, as they normally do it so their kids can eat whatever we bring or order. I said we're not coming because Alan can't make it tonight and it's also a school night. My boyfriend's phone immediately rings and it's their kids on speakerphone, talking all excited and asking when we're getting there. Now this woman had the audacity to tell her kids right there and then that we will not be going, and since we're not going, we won't be bringing food, and they won't be eating dinner tonight. And she hung up. And let me tell you, I lost it. I called her back right then and there and told her, among a bunch of other very impolite things, that if she ever uses her kids again as emotional blackmail for money or free food, that I would call child services. And it's not my fault or the kids' fault that they don't know how to properly handle money without burning it on stupid things. She then got angry and said it was all just a joke, and I am livid. So this post really just proved that her friend is super duper toxic. And OP definitely needs to cut her off forever. Using your kids to blackmail friends and family is such a terrible thing to do, and it just sucks that she's still a part of that friends group. So I used to work at a movie theater. The story involves the owner's daughter. And this woman was something else. She was somewhere in her late 40s and a tangled mess of brown, frizzy hair. She was also one of the most insufferable individuals that I've ever met in my life, not to mention entitled. So naturally, her father decided to get her a job at the movie theater. The staff wasn't happy to hear this, as nobody liked this woman. Now, before this job, she would frequently stop by the theater, often loitering for hours since she didn't have a job to go to. And any job she did get, she couldn't hold down for very long because she felt she didn't have to work since her dad had money. And since her dad owned the theater, she felt like she could boss everybody around and run off to daddy if any of us snapped at her. Eventually, he got tired of just giving her money when she asked, so the job was an attempt to have her earn money he gave her. And since she was about 20 years older than the average employee at the theater, she stuck out like a sore thumb. Thankfully, he knew better than to put her into a management position, or everybody would have walked out. She was ultimately regulated to the box office, where she could stay out of the way of the rest of the staff. The staff called her a wide variety of names. Some of the nicer ones included the Beast, the Troll, the Banshee, the Wicked Witch of the box office, or just plain Satan. Her wrath wasn't just limited to the staff though. We had this unwritten rule at the theater that immediate family was allowed to come in to catch any movie at any time. This didn't stop her from going off on family members that came in, particularly the dad of one of the coworkers that she didn't like. She would often snap at this poor guy, who was a very good-natured guy and friendly with everyone. So on one particular Saturday, we had been gravely understaffed. 2 people had called out that day, leaving us scrambled to try to get through the wave of people that kept coming in. Normally I worked as an usher, but unfortunately on this day, I was stuck in the box office with the owner's daughter because 1, I could knock out a line rather quickly, and 2, since I was quiet and had a relatively long fuse, I was one of the few people who could work a shift with her without being on the verge of strangling her. With how the day had been going, everyone was on edge. Me especially, since I was stuck working a double to help cover one of the people who called sick. When the crowds finally died down and the lobby had been straightened up, a couple of employees stepped outside for a smoke break, and this invoked the wrath of the owner's daughter. She lost it, snapping at them as they were heading out the door, yelling at them to get back to work. At this, I turned to her and said, "Look, it's been a long day for all of us. Please lay off." She then looked at me and comments on everybody's so-called lack of performance and how she could get us all fired. To this day, an exchange between the two of us is a bit of a blur to me now, as it's been quite a few years. My anger had been building, as she continued to be snippy, and the next thing I knew, I was shouting at her, "F you." I then proceeded to storm out of the box, with everybody in the lobby hearing it. They were now just staring at me with their jaws on the floor, as many never heard me snap like that, let alone at her. I went upstairs to the manager's office so angry that I was visibly shaken. Even the manager was stunned to see this. He proceeds to get on the phone and call the owner about how his daughter was behaving. The owner said he was going to have a talk with her the next day. We figured she was going to try to throw us under the bus. The next day, the owner comes in with his daughter, not too far behind, and they both go up to his office to talk. They were both up there for about an hour, leaving us all wondering what was going on. Eventually, we saw his daughter storm down the stairs and out the door without saying a word to anybody. She had been suspended for 2 weeks. I never got so much as a slap on the wrist, although they tried to enforce a rule about using profanity in the lobby. My bad. I eventually quit when I found a better job. The manager later told me that the owner was forced to fire his own daughter because she couldn't get along with the staff, and was trying to take it out on the mother of another employee. The mother complained to the owner, casually mentioning that this level of harassment could lead to a lawsuit. The daughter would still stop in regularly though to catch a movie and get free concessions. That however came to a halt when the owner sold the theater. Last I heard, she'd been living with her older sister, but she was kicked out when she yelled at the nanny and the nanny recorded it. Why didn't we think to do that? That is wild, guys. 40 years old and still relying on daddy's money, hey? My dad owns a business, he has money, so I don't need to work. I can also boss staff around any time I want. That's such entitled mentality. And that, my friends, is r/entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the tales today. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. If you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, a drunk couple pretends to be Opie's parents to kidnap her. It's a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.